some really interesting announcements in mobile over the last couple of days. There are 1 billion active users of iOS, right? So that means that there are 1 billion active devices of iOS. It's a mind-blowing number. Perhaps even more mind-blowing is Facebook's announcement that they have 1 billion people a day logging into the app. Perhaps even more interesting than that is that 90% of their revenue is generated from mobile. So what's your mobile strategy? If you think about how we use our smartphones today, okay, it's very rare that you'll actually go into a specific app unless you are going to do some very specific task. For example, if I go into WordSwag, if I'm going to create an Instagram quote message, or I need to add some really cool text to a photo, I'll go and do that. But if you think about it, most of our interactions when we're working with an app are driven by notifications. So little push notification text messages from apps, so to speak, saying, hey, something that you're interested in is happening right now. Widgets, so if you swipe down on iOS or on your screen with Android, you click on a widget because the widget's there to identify you. Widgets on the phone too, right? Another way of doing that. And then, of course, search. But search has completely changed in terms of mobile apps. So, okay, so if we concede that the way we access a majority of our stuff is not by going to the app itself, but by going to notifications, going to widgets, or using search. How are you going to do that without an app? It's very rare. Over the last couple of months, I'm working with a client that doesn't tell me that at least 50% of their traffic comes from mobile. What percentage comes from mobile for you? I've been banging on about this for years now, but it's getting beyond a joke. Yet, most people are still investing most of their time into their desktop strategy. What's the lifeblood of any online business? Lead generation. Okay, lead generation is the most important thing. And some of the results we're seeing with lead generation on mobile is incredible. You know, I'm working with Nathan Chan from Founder Magazine at the moment, and he's using his app strategy to generate 10,000 leads a month, and he's not even paying for any of that. Like, it's free leads. It's like 2004. It's like a decade ago all over again. But again, I ask you, how can you do lead generation on a mobile device without an app? The worst experience any of us have on a mobile device right now, and Facebook knows this, Google knows this, Apple knows this, is the moment you slip out of something that's on the mobile device, is native, as they call it, and have to go to the web. You know this, you're in Facebook and you're looking for an article, you go, oh, that article's going to be interesting, particularly those videos, you know, with the catchy copywritten headlines, and you click on it, and what comes up? Verbal diarrhea. It's this horrible, horrific experience, right? And you're clicking on things, they're trying to lick bait you, they're trying to clickbait you. It's a horrible, horrific experience. Facebook knows this, Apple knows this, Google knows this, and they all have answers. Now, it's not happening today, but it is rolling out. We're already seeing it on iOS, and you will start to see Google with their AMP strategy, which is a way of, they call it fast loading of sites, and that is, I shouldn't even use quotes on that, because that is the last frontier of horrible mobile experiences, is having to go back to the old web on your mobile device for sites that have typically been set up for desktop. So Google has AMP, Facebook has instant articles, and iOS has their new search methodology, which, by the way, Google are replicating on Android. Okay, so it's happening across the board. What's that mean? It means that they will search your device first for content before it goes to Google, before it goes to Bing or YouTube or any of those other services. Because they all think, quite rightly, that if you've actually chosen a content source, that you want information from that content source, and you would prefer information from your personally chosen content source than a random and horrific experience on mobile, going out to a search engine, then having to click on the link, and oh, that's not the right thing, oh, it's clickbait, because they're publishers who are just desperate to try get declining ad revenues on desktop. So that's great. I think we all get that. How are you going to do that without an app? Facebook's earnings came out, and if you've been following me, no surprise, they were stellar, and they will continue to be stellar. You can't have that larger amount of the world's population all logging into the one place over a 24-hour period. You've got 1 billion people logging in every 24 hours. As my mentor Gary Halbert used to say, take me to where the hungry market is. Where's the starving crowd? So it's on mobile. 90%, and this was the interesting figure, 90% of Facebook's revenue, which is ads, is derived from mobile. Not desktop, mobile. 90% of their ad revenues. Now let's pull this string, let's pull this thread and see what that means. So if 90% of their mobile revenue, their overall ad revenue is coming from mobile, that means that the ads that are working on mobile are the most effective ads. Because guess what? People don't pay if they're not effective. It's pay per click. No clicky, no washy. So, okay, let's keep pulling that thread. So what does that mean? That means that Facebook advertising, and oh, wow, Ed, amazing insight right now. Facebook advertising is really, really important. No kidding. You know, we've been telling you that for 2 years. Here's the deal. What's the most effective ad unit on Facebook? By so far, it's not funny. In fact, according to their own figures, is responsible for over 50% of their ad revenues. App download. The app download. You've all seen them. You see them every time you scroll through your mobile. You know, it's the install app. You look at the ad unit and you click on the install app. So, okay, if that's the case, we want to take advantage of that because we need lead generation. We need people to buy our stuff. We need to attract people's attention. And if everybody's on Facebook, we need to do that. And wouldn't it make sense if you're going to use Facebook, don't you want to use the most effective ad unit by so far it's not funny? Of course, you would. Well, how are you going to do that without an app? I'm a bit of a marketing mercenary, so there are two things I want from people who download my app. Whether they continue to use it or not is really neither here nor there. I hope they do, and I hope I'm publishing content which is really interesting for my niche. But most importantly, it's for lead generation and it's for revenue generation. And most specifically lead generation, because we know that we can make way more money from back end and by being able to educate and do launches and all those things. Email's not dead, not even close. So lead generation, by definition, requires an app. And it requires an app that's been built from the ground up for lead generation. It's hilarious to me. So many of these magazine apps, and why has Magcast been so successful where others have been such a failure? Because they didn't think about lead generation. They didn't think about push notification and communication. But let's focus on lead generation. If your app isn't built from the ground up to easily and simply in one button click collect somebody's email, well, then you are wasting your time from a lead generation perspective. So I ask you again, how are you going to collect leads without an app? Think about this. If Facebook, if Google, and if Apple are directing all their efforts on keeping you on your mobile device, how are you going to collect their leads from a website when it's going to present somebody's app information first? Your competitors. It's up to you. You can ignore the app ecosystem as much as you like. You go for your life. But if you think you're going to compete on mobile without an app, you have rocks in your head. But Ed, what about a small local business and nobody bothers to open those apps? Of course. Nobody opens those apps. Duh. But you need to be able to use notifications. You need to be able to appear in search. You need to be able to... Imagine if you could send push notifications based on what a person has looked at in your app or what notifications they responded to. Imagine that. Well, how are you going to do that without an app? How do you communicate with your friends? The fundamental, and I think we'll all agree with this, direct marketing, which is the type of marketing that I'm interested in, direct response. Hear that? Direct response advertising. In other words, I don't get paid unless somebody directly responds to my ad. Direct response trends have directly followed and trailed, indeed, our most popular communications devices. If you want to see what is going to be most effective, you have to look at how you communicate with your best friends. And if we look throughout history, how did that happen? Right? Face-to-face, because there was no other alternatives. Then we had telegram. Then we had telephone. Then we had telephone. What came after telephone? You would argue fax. Okay? Then you had email. And then, of course, we had our messaging. And if you ask the thing today, how are people communicating? How do you communicate with your best friends? It's by messaging. It's by push notifications. If you can't figure out a way to get into that ecosystem, then you're cut out of the conversation. Because people will, over time, not tomorrow, right? I'm not saying that this is all happening today, but doesn't it make sense? I could have been having this conversation a decade ago about blogging. It was early days, nobody was doing it, nobody was making any real money with it. But it's those people who started then that are making all the money now. Show me a blog that started up in the last 12 months that's making really significant money and having a really significant impact. You can show me YouTube channels that are doing that, for sure, because it's new. You can show me Instagrammers that are doing that. You can show me apps that are doing that. It's up to you. You can ignore all this. Go for it, please. But the winners have always come from the people who adapt the technology right it through that initial, every technology has this incredible, wow, this is awesome, and then there's the inevitable disappointment, but the people who stick with it ride the inevitable increase. It's that classic S-curve that has happened throughout history for time immemorial. So how are you going to participate with that without an app? So you might be asking me, well, Ed, shouldn't I be using Snapchat, Instagram, Blab, Periscope, YouTube, all of these things as part of my mobile strategy? Depending on your market, of course, the answer is yes. So, Ed, do I need my own app? Can't I just interact with all of those particular areas? Well, let me ask you one question. How are people going to discover you? How are people going to discover you on YouTube? How are people going to discover you on Instagram? Now, in terms of discovery, there are some great techniques for Instagram. There are some great techniques for all of these platforms. There are great techniques with apps for discovery, but guess what? You have to have an app. So how are you going to get discovered in this new mobile era? The most effective ad unit on Facebook is app download. The most effective ad unit on Instagram is, let me guess, app download. How are you going to get discovered without an app? It really is up to you whether you have an app strategy or not. But don't be for 1 second confused that there are not going to be winners in your marketplace who use an app as a core part of their mobile strategy. You can use any excuse that you like, but the numbers, the statistics speak for themselves. So I ask you again, how are you going to participate in the mobile revolution without an app?